They control, I mean, they don't control the House, they don't control the Senate, they don't control the White House, and they don't control the Supreme Court. So now is the time to break some, and break some China.
They do control the email lists that continue to ask for money.
Well, that's true.
They still have that.
We're in a constitutional crisis, and we very well may be. I'm not trying to downplay that reality. When you have a president, which seems to be what's happening, and an administration who are defying a court order, that is ignoring the one branch of government, that is technically, I think as lawyers would define it, a constitutional crisis.
Right. Well, then through an appeal
could be.
We're a little bit down the road, but
a road to a constitutional crisis. Okay. How's that? Okay. That's what a press secretary does.
The road to constitutional crisis. Boy, if that's not a title of a Rachel Maddow special, I don't know what is.
Well,
all right, folks, buckle up because today's story is a roller coaster you won't want to miss. We're diving headfirst into the explosive confrontation between Jon Stewart, a figure who many say should be the next Democratic frontrunner, and MSNBC's Jen Psaki.
See, I disagree with that. I think it's not that you're able to be independent. It's that you're then a prisoner purely to the minute by minutes. Purely
you mean in terms of ratings?
The ratings, incentives, and all those other things. If you don't have the ideological component, right, then you don't have a governing authority of editorial authority, right? The greatest trick Roger Ailes ever played was he delegitimized editorial authority while exercising absolute steel trapdoor editorial authority.
The greatest thing he did because it led them to be an arm piece, a mouthpiece of the right wing.
It led them to be exactly what he wanted it to be, which is an effective expression of his worldview.
And MSNBC, I am unburdened by not having, I can share whatever I think. I have obviously worked in Democratic politics for 20 years. I don't hide anything about that. It is a progressive leaning network, but nobody is, to the frustration at times of many elected Democrats, it is not a mouthpiece of the Democrats.
Stewart's no stranger to candid commentary, and this time, he's taking Psaki and her network to task for what he calls blatant and misleading bias, a move that's leaving both sides of the aisle buzzing. Now, what happened out there? Why all the fireworks? Trust me, you're going to want to stick around as we unravel every shocking detail of this face-off. If you love this kind of truth-telling and bold analysis, hit that subscribe button. I'm aiming for 1,000 subscribers by the end of February, and I can't do it without you. So, let's dive deeper into this ongoing drama. Jon Stewart's critique of the American media, focusing primarily on MSNBC, has sparked a heated discussion. Stewart accuses the network, and more specifically Jen Psaki, a former White House press secretary, of perpetuating a system where news is not just reported, but constructed around an agenda.
But Ailes didn't do that either. It was the principle, the ideological principles, not the party. He and Murdoch the same way. They're promoting an ideological worldview, right? That they believe is correct. And Theo Vaughn and Joe Rogan, I think, are different animals than any of this. Like, I wouldn't say I don't think they're part of any machine.
Don't you think they're but they are still in the right wing ecosystem? Wouldn't you agree?
No, I would think they're in. No, I would consider them in a more probably libertarian comedic complex, more along the lines of, and if you watch or listen to their shows, a lot of times it's just pure like goofing off.
Has nothing to do with politics, and oftentimes, but
entirely.
But they are supportive of the Trump enterprise, is what I mean. So maybe I'm loosely putting them in that category.
I think they are supportive, but not. They are not relentless in the Trump enterprise. Like, they are not Charlie Kirk. They are not Ben Shapiro. Like, they are very different animals. They are not invested in the shit that you get picked up and like go to the headlines of media. But on balance, that's not what their shows are about.
Now, you might be wondering, what did Stewart actually say to get everyone talking?
This was actually one of the things in the weeks after the election where I felt like it wasn't that I was shocked out of my mind that Trump won. I mean, I've been in politics, I've traveled around the country, but how did this happen and why did this happen and what can be learned from it, which I think is pivotal to understanding in order to figure out how to move forward, which I think is the point, is part of what I'm hearing from what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think there's one answer. And I know that there are efforts in different places to explore that question. I think the DNC is doing one. I don't know what will come out of that. I'm keeping my expectations low. But that's sort of, to me, it is a multitude of things. It is how the Democrats are communicating about issues, but it's also, maybe it's a policy question too. And let's not all just call it a messaging issue, because it may not just be a messaging issue. Mm-hmm. It's misinformation and disinformation. And that's not just, everybody shorthands this as, if Democrats only appeared on Joe Rogan's podcast. I'm like, I'm not sure. I don't know that he's inviting many. Maybe he is, but that's not the only answer. I think there's a lot of layers of it. It's also the kind of candidates people run. That's not a hack on Kamala Harris. I mean, in different races as well. And sometimes there have been purity tests in the Democratic Party that aren't particularly constructive. The purity test should be, can you win? And will you be a part of the caucus? Because the majority helps make things happen. I don't have an answer yet, but this is the thing that I want to explore.
And why Psaki? All right, let's take a closer look at what unfolded in this confrontation. Stewart approached Psaki in an interview with a straightforward question about media objectivity. He laid it out, pointing out how MSNBC, in Stewart's view, went off the rails, operating more as a mouthpiece for the Democratic Party rather than an objective news source. Stewart's argument was that mainstream networks like MSNBC have a tendency to skew their reporting, aligning stories with the Democratic narrative and, quite frankly, leaving a lot of Americans disillusioned. He openly challenged Psaki on how the network decides what's newsworthy, suggesting that there's a persistent undertone of political maneuvering shaping the content.
The president has said, and you have tweeted, that allegations of wrongdoing based on files pulled from Hunter Biden's laptop are Russian disinformation. There is a new book by a Politico reporter that finds some of the files on there are genuine. Is the White House still going with Russian disinformation?
I think it's broadly known and widely known, Peter, that there was a broad range of Russian disinformation back in 2020.
Well, Psaki didn't seem particularly flustered, but her replies came across as rehearsed and somewhat detached. She claimed people like Joe Rogan and Theo Vaughn were part of a right-wing echo chamber, while Stewart shook his head, disagreeing, indicating how people on her network simply can't grasp their audience's perception and reality. Psaki insisted that MSNBC maintains independence in its editorial choices.
That I'm not going to do anything. I said I abide by the jury decision, and I will do that, and I will not pardon him.
I can't emphasize enough from knowing him how hard that second half must have been for him to say. I mean, Joe Biden is a person who answers his phone every time any of his grandchildren call, anytime, doesn't matter what's going on. He does the things your grandparents do. When they pretend you drop money on the floor just so you have $20 in your pocket and they say, did you drop something? He's deeply in love with his wife. I mean, deeply. His family, with all the pain and anguish that surrounded it, is his heart. But Joe Biden's character as a public servant is what drove him to make clear that the law applies to everyone. His decision not to pardon his son is not an expression of restraint or removal in any way from what his son has gone through and is continuing to go through, but of principle. Because the justice system that convicted his only surviving son is the same justice system he's vowed to protect. And if that doesn't tell you who Joe Biden is, I don't really know what does.
But Stewart wasn't buying it. He drove the point home by highlighting how editorial decisions are still influenced by the underlying need to retain ratings and viewership, effectively tethering them to their audience's expectations.
As you probably know by now, President Biden pardoned his son Hunter last night. And if you recall the president saying repeatedly over the last few months that he would not pardon his own son for months he's been saying that, you'd be correct. It was a commitment that was widely applauded, for good reason, including by me. And last night, Joe Biden reversed course on that commitment. And if you're wondering whether that is good politics, if you're wondering if this is great for his legacy as someone who has consistently stood for principle over personal needs, who even kept the guy on in Delaware who was appointed by Trump, who was going to keep investigating his son, it's not good politics. And yes, Hunter Biden has done some stupid things. And yes, Hunter Biden has done some illegal things. He should not have lied about his drug use when filling out paperwork to register for a handgun. We all knew about his recovery from an addiction. He wrote an entire book about it. And of course, he should have paid his taxes in full and on time, as everyone should. My bet is Joe Biden knows that too. But he made his decision not as a politician. He made it as a dad. And by the way, his son is a private citizen. He's not a threat to our intelligence gathering, to our national intelligence, or to our law enforcement institutions. Joe Biden is going to be a private citizen in 50 days, too. So tonight, And moving forward, we're going to spend most of our time talking about the people who are and who may be. People like Kash Patel, who Trump tapped this weekend to lead the FBI. Now, there are lots of problems with that choice. First of all, he's unqualified.
But hey, let's pause for a second and consider this. If the news is, just like Jon Stewart pointed out, influenced by viewer expectations to this degree, how reliable can it truly be? You know, it makes you scratch your head and wonder why people place so much trust in these outlets when so much seems dictated by political alignment and viewership figures. Now think about it. For Stewart, what's at stake is more than just differing political exclamations. It's about trust and accountability. He argued that citizens are seeking truth, something raw and real, not tainted with political favoritism. Stewart accused mainstream media, not just MSNBC, of having failed in its duty to challenge authority and double-check facts without party bias. For a moment there, in this back and forth, you could almost feel the tension rising. Psaki doubling down with her defense, claiming Democrats might occasionally get frustrated with the network, implying MSNBC isn't quite the party loyalist Stewart was suggesting. However, Stewart fired back, pointing out their narrative has seamlessly aligned with the Democratic agenda far too often. And here's another layer to consider. Stewart slammed the network's tunnel vision, emphasizing how they, along with other outlets, failed to capture the true extent of Donald Trump's resonating appeal to millions of Americans during his presidency. Instead, Stewart marked them as tunnel-visioned, depicting a rather one-dimensional villain image of Trump and his supporters, ignoring deeper socioeconomic drives behind his mass appeal. So, pause and ask yourself, when does media representation cross the line from informative to manipulative? Stewart wasn't shy about fanning the flames, holding the media's feet to the fire for their role in deepening the political divide. After all, aren't these biases in many ways stirring the pot of division rather than mending it? But there's more. You see, Stewart's overall premise wasn't just about MSNBC. He expanded his critique to encompass major American media players, pointing at how they reinforce political divides instead of bridging them. By painting the opposition in extreme colors, media organizations, he argued, create caricatured versions of political figures, which further sow polarization. In conclusion, Stewart's position, clearly laid out, was that people are tired of media being just another chess piece in the political game, craving content that speaks truth to power without cloaking it in partisan echo chambers. Stewart contends that media bias not only skews public perception but also erodes democratic engagement. To be honest, it strikes a chord, doesn't it? When you, as a viewer, are bombarded with one-sided narratives, how do you critically analyze and develop an informed opinion? The role of media is pivotal, and Stewart brings to light the essential need for reform in journalistic approaches. And there we are, wrapped up in this tussle, a stark reminder to always question, always probe. Before we go, let me throw this back to you. What's your take on Stewart's criticism? Does it resonate with you? Leave a comment below with your thoughts on media biases. And remember, your engagement matters. Like seriously, so let's chat in the comments section down below.